Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going to be taking a look at human nature
Okay.
using Robert Greene's book, The Laws of Human Nature.
Sounds good.
Now, I know a lot of you out there listening are probably curious about why you keep running into certain personality types, right? And you want to get better at handling those interactions.
Right.
And we're going to get to that.
Okay.
But first, I
Yeah.
think it's going to be pretty surprising to you just how much of what we think of as human nature is actually driven by forces that we don't even realize are there.
Absolutely. Greene's book really challenges that whole assumption that we're mostly rational beings.
Right.
You know, he goes really deep into the role that emotions play in shaping how we see the world and how we make decisions.
Yeah, and one of the things that really stood out to me when I was reading it was this idea of high-grade irrationality. Can you break that down a little bit for us?
Yeah. So think about it this way. Imagine you're under a ton of pressure. Deadlines are coming up. The stakes are really high.
Right.
And suddenly, you're usually pretty calm and collected, but suddenly you're making impulsive decisions, snapping at your colleagues, or just getting super anxious and bogged down. That's kind of what he's talking about with high-grade irrationality.
So our brain has this hidden panic button, and when things get too tough, it's like, whoo, everything just goes out the window.
Right. And it's not even just stress, Greene points out that even those decisions that we make that seem super rational are often fueled by deeper emotional currents.
Interesting.
Whether it's a desire for power, wanting to feel validated, or even just needing to feel in control.
Okay.
He uses this example of politicians from ancient Athens who believed they were being totally rational.
Right.
But their actions were constantly driven by this, thirst for power and prestige. And that ultimately led to their own downfall.
Wow. Okay, so how do we start to even recognize this in ourselves?
Right.
I mean, I like to think I'm a pretty self-aware person.
Yeah.
But this whole idea that I might be making choices based on emotions that I'm not even really conscious of is a little unsettling to me.
Yeah, I think it is unsettling.
Yeah.
But it's also empowering once you start to realize it.
Okay.
So the first step is just kind of admitting that emotions have power in your life, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Think about a time that you said or did something in the heat of the moment that you regretted later. Can you identify what emotions were driving you to do that?
Okay.
Was it anger? Was it fear?
Yeah.
Insecurity?
Right. Yeah.
By understanding those triggers that lead to these big emotional surges, you can start to develop strategies to manage them better.
So it's almost like we have to train our brains to think differently.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're getting at?
A way, yeah. So that's where this awareness of cognitive biases comes in. Greene goes into a bunch of these biases, which are basically these mental shortcuts that our brains use to process information quickly.
Right.
But a lot of times it leads to flawed thinking.
Interesting. And one of the ones that really kind of stood out to me was this conviction bias.
Right.
Where we tend to cling to beliefs that we're emotionally invested in, even when we start to have some doubts creeping in.
Exactly. It's like when you've been totally sold on an idea.
Right.
Maybe it's a product. Maybe it's a political candidate.
Yeah.
Or even just a personal theory you have about something. And then someone shows you evidence that contradicts your belief.
Yeah.
And you just double down.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, nope, I'm not hearing it. You dig your heels in and you reject anything that challenges your viewpoint.
It's so true.
That's that conviction bias at work.
You know what it makes me think of?
Yeah.
When you have those charismatic speakers or salespeople, right?
Yeah.
They're so good at projecting that conviction that it makes you more likely to listen to them and believe them.
Right.
Even if what they're saying isn't completely logical.
It's true. And it's not even just big decisions. It's everyday choices.
Right.
It can even affect our long-term goals.
Wow.
Recognizing it is really important for making sound judgments and not making, decisions that could hurt us in the long run.
Yeah. So are there other things that we need to be aware of? Are there other biases or other...
Well, there's the rising pressure bias,
okay,
which is the idea that stress is like a truth serum, revealing those hidden flaws and tendencies.
Oh. Have you ever noticed how some people just totally unravel when things get stressful?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But then others are super calm and they just kind of stay composed?
Yeah, I know someone who gets super snacky and irritable when things are stressful.
Right.
But then I have another friend who It's like they thrive under pressure.
They get super focused and they're just like, let's go.
It's almost like it brings out their superpower.
Right, yeah.
It's wild. Understanding how you personally respond to pressure is really important, you know?
Okay.
It lets you anticipate your pitfalls and figure out ways to stay grounded when the heat is on.
So, okay, we're getting a handle on how to manage our own irrational tendencies.
Yeah.
But what about other people? Right.
Right.
Because everybody else is irrational too.
Exactly.
That seems like a whole other...
Totally. It's a whole other challenge.
Yeah.
That's where empathy comes in.
Okay.
And this is something that Greene talks about throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
He argues that we're naturally self-absorbed, and that gets in the way.
So you're saying we're all a little bit narcissistic?
To some degree, yeah. I mean, we're all kind of wired to prioritize our own needs and our own perspectives, right? But the way to overcome that is to cultivate empathy.
Okay, so empathy is the key here.
Right, that ability to really understand and share in other people's feelings.
Okay, but how do you actually do that?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're dealing with someone who is being super difficult or irrational. How do you get inside their head?
One of the most powerful examples I think Greene gives in the book is this story about Ernest Shackleton.
Oh, yeah, the explorer.
The explorer who led this crazy expedition to Antarctica.
Right, right.
They were stranded on the ice for months.
Oh, wow.
Facing incredible hardship.
Talk about a pressure cooker.
Yeah, and constantly under the threat of starvation.
Right.
So you could say it was a breeding ground for high-grade irrationality.
Totally.
But Shackleton managed to keep his whole crew together, even under those crazy circumstances, by being hyper-aware of their emotions. Yeah. He would make it a point to talk to each crew member, you know, and have conversations that were tailored to that specific person.
So he really, understood each of them individually.
Yes. He would address their anxieties, find ways to keep their spirits up.
Mm-hmm.
He even, and this is a crazy one, volunteered to kill the cook's pet cat when they ran out of food.
Oh, wow.
Seems like a small thing.
Right.
But it had a huge impact on keeping morale up.
Right, because everybody was in it together.
Exactly. Fostering that sense of shared sacrifice.
It's an incredible story, and it just really shows that even in the worst situations, those small acts of empathy can make a huge difference in building trust and connection.
And true leadership isn't about bossing people around.
Right.
It's about understanding and responding to the needs of the people you're leading.
Okay, so this applies to all relationships then, not just leadership roles.
Yeah, whether it's a tough coworker,
right,
a demanding boss, or even a frustrating family member.
Yeah.
Empathy can change the whole dynamic and lead to much better outcomes.
So empathy is like this superpower that we can all learn to navigate.
Yes, it is, yeah.
These complex human relationships.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
But even when we're trying to be empathetic, it's not always easy to figure out what's really going on, right?
Right.
People aren't always straightforward with their feelings.
Exactly. And that's where reading nonverbal cues comes in.
Okay.
We say so much without even saying a word.
Right.
Our body language,
right,
our facial expressions, tone of voice,
right,
all of it reveals hidden truths about what we're thinking and feeling.
It's like a secret language.
It is.
That we all speak, but we don't always even know that we're speaking it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Greene says nonverbal cues are some of the most reliable indicators of someone's true state of mind.
Okay.
Especially when they're trying to hide how they really feel.
Interesting.
Think about those fleeting facial expressions, those micro expressions.
Yeah.
They only last for a fraction of a second, but they can betray, underlying emotions like fear or anger or disgust.
So our faces are giving away our secrets, even when our words are trying to hide them.
Exactly.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So are there other things that we should watch out for? Give us some specific examples.
Okay, so tightened lips, furrowed brows, clenched jaws. Those are often signs of tension or disapproval.
Right.
Rolling your eyes or a forced smile might mean that someone doesn't agree or they're uncomfortable. If someone suddenly folds their arms or turns away from you, that could mean they're trying to disengage from the conversation.
Wow. So it's our bodies are always sending these signals even when we're not aware of it.
Totally.
And the other way around, if someone is mirroring your body language, that means that there's a rapport there.
That's called synchrony.
Okay.
And it's often a sign of rapport and connection.
Interesting. So if I'm trying to build rapport with someone, should I be subtly mirroring their posture and gestures?
You can. You just want to make sure you're doing it subtly, authentically.
Right, yeah.
It shouldn't look like you're mimicking them. It should be more about creating that shared energy and understanding.
Wow. Okay, so we're starting to see how all this fits together. Understanding our own irrationality.
Right.
Cultivating empathy. Paying attention to those nonverbal cues.
It's like building a toolkit to deal with other people.
Yeah, exactly. But I've got this one question that I can't get out of my head.
Okay.
What if we have these hidden emotional drivers and these unconscious biases?
Yeah.
Is there a part of us that we're not even aware of?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Is there a shadow self?
Yeah, lurking beneath the surface.
Right, and it leads us to the concept of the shadow.
Oh, okay.
Greene says we all have this shadow side, this hidden part of ourselves that has all these impulses and anxieties that we repress because they're not socially acceptable.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Yeah. So tell me more about this shadow. What is it?
Okay. So think of it as the flip side of that persona that we so carefully create for the world.
Right.
It's that part of us we hide even from ourselves a lot of the time. It's where we store all those unacceptable qualities,
Okay.
Our aggression, envy, our insecurities, even our darker fantasies.
Wow. Okay.
It's not that these things are bad. It's just that society tells us, no, you can't be like that.
Right.
So we push it down.
It sounds very Freudian.
It does. But Greene takes it a step further. Okay. He says understanding the shadow is key, not just for personal growth, but for understanding things like power, seduction, social influence.
So how do we recognize our own shadow?
Right. If it's hidden, how do you see it?
Yeah.
Well, it usually shows itself in more subtle ways, like slips of the tongue, impulsive actions, or even how we project things onto other people.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Have you ever judged someone really harshly for something that you secretly don't like about yourself?
Oh, yeah.
That's often the shadow.
Okay.
It's projecting those repressed traits onto someone else.
So we're pointing the finger at someone else so that we don't have to look at ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. And it can also show up through exaggerated traits.
Huh. Like what?
Someone who's super overconfident might actually be masking a lot of insecurity.
Right.
Someone who's super nice might be holding back anger.
Interesting.
Or someone who's really rigid and rational might be in denial about how much their emotions actually influence them.
This is making me think of Anton Chekhov.
Oh, yeah.
The Russian writer.
He was brilliant.
He had this dark and complex understanding of human nature,
Yeah.
He always wrote about these hidden motivations and desires.
Greene actually uses Chekhov as an example.
Does he?
Of how the shadow can be a source of creativity and insight.
Okay.
Chekhov had a rough childhood. He grew up poor. His dad was really domineering and abusive. Yep. It was just chaotic. Yeah. But even though it was traumatic, it shaped how he saw the world and gave him this deep empathy for people who were struggling.
Wow. So his shadow was actually the source of his genius.
In a way, yeah.
Wow. So it's those dark experiences can sometimes lead to our greatest strengths.
It's true.
That's pretty amazing. Okay, so if acknowledging and integrating our shadow is so important for growth, are there certain personality types that have a tougher time doing that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it brings us to what Greene calls toxic types.
Oh, okay.
These are the people who constantly drain our energy.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah.
You all know those people, right?
Yeah.
Always surrounded by drama.
Right.
Or negativity.
They just suck the life out of you.
Yeah.
Greene talks about a few specific ones to watch out for. The resentful, the drama magnet, and the rigid rationalist.
Okay, let's break those down.
Okay.
So, the resentful, tell me about them.
They're always holding a grudge, right?
Okay.
They feel like the world did them wrong. They always blame other people for their problems.
Yeah, you can spot them from a mile away. They're constantly complaining.
They're playing the victim, finding fault with everything.
Yep.
Okay, so then you have the drama magnet.
Okay.
They love chaos and conflict.
Right, it's they need it.
They need it.
Yeah.
They always seem to be in the middle of some drama.
Right.
And they're masters at pulling other people into it.
And always playing the victim.
Always the victim.
Right.
Then you have the rigid rationalist.
Right.
They deny that human beings are irrational.
Okay.
And they get super controlling and inflexible.
These are the people that think they have all the answers.
Yes.
Right? And if you disagree with them, you're wrong.
And judgmental. You can't even have a normal conversation with them.
Right. And the thing is, these toxic types aren't bad people.
Okay.
They're often just acting from a place of deep insecurity or some past trauma.
Right. So they need help.
But their behavior can be really harmful to the people around them.
Yeah.
So you've got to recognize them and protect yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, before we get into like how to actually deal with these toxic types, I want to go back to something else Greene was talking about.
Okay.
He talked about how society forces us to conform to these gender roles.
Right.
And that can actually repress valuable masculine or feminine qualities.
Totally.
So it makes me wonder, are we holding ourselves back
That's the question.
by trying to fit into these boxes that don't really reflect who we are?
That's exactly his point, yeah.
Okay.
He says that this gender rigidity limits our potential.
Right.
It keeps us from fully expressing ourselves.
Yep. He wants us to reconnect with those repressed qualities.
Okay.
It can unlock creativity, boost our confidence, make us more attractive and influential.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And he talks about Katerina Sforza,
Oh, yeah.
this Renaissance noblewoman
She was amazing.
who defied everyone's expectations
Totally.
by embracing both her masculine and feminine sides.
She was a warrior and a leader.
Wow.
And she refused to be limited by what society said she should be.
It's such a good reminder that true strength comes from embracing every part of who we are.
Exactly.
It's about owning our uniqueness, not trying to fit in.
Totally.
This has been so insightful, and I'm already starting to feel like I have these new tools to understand myself and the people around me.
Yeah.
But before we dive deeper into this idea of authenticity and how to cultivate it, I think it's time for a quick break.
Sounds good.
We'll be back with more from the laws of human nature in just a minute.
Okay, so before the break, we were talking about embracing our authentic selves. And, that kind of ties into another big idea, that Greene explores this whole search for purpose. He says that humans need to have a purpose. It's like built into us.
Okay.
But it's so easy to get caught up chasing the wrong things.
Oh, yeah.
Like money or status or just fleeting pleasure.
Have you ever felt that? Like you're on this treadmill and you're chasing something, but you never quite get there.
Totally. And Greene says that just chasing external validation will leave you feeling empty.
Yeah. It's like you get that thing you've been working towards and you're like, okay, now what?
Right. Like, is that all there is?
Yeah.
True fulfillment, he says, comes from finding a purpose that's aligned with your values.
Okay.
Your talents, your passions, something that gives your life meaning.
That makes sense, but how do we even figure out what that is?
Yeah, it can be tough.
It's like this big abstract thing.
It is, but Greene gives us some clues. Okay. He says, look back at your childhood.
Okay.
What were you drawn to back then? What did you do naturally, joyfully?
Like before we got all jaded.
Exactly.
World.
Like tapping into that inner child.
Okay, I like that.
He also talks about mentors.
Right. Having people to guide you.
He uses Coco Chanel as an example.
Oh, interesting.
From a young age, she knew she wanted to design clothes, but she didn't know much about business.
Right.
So she found a mentor, this guy named Arthur Boy Capel. He was a businessman, saw her potential, and helped her launch her fashion line.
Wow. So finding the right mentor can really make a difference.
Big time.
Okay, so we're starting to get a sense of how to find our purpose and how to build a support system.
Right.
But the world is competitive.
Right. Oh, yeah.
It's tough out there.
Sometimes it feels like you need more than just talent and hard work to really succeed.
I hear you.
It's like you need that certain something.
Like that aura of authority. Yeah, that makes people pay attention.
Right. That commands respect and influence.
Okay, so Greene talks about authority, right?
He does. And he says true authority isn't about dominance.
Okay.
It's not about force.
So it's not about barking orders or anything?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's about inspiring trust and respect.
Okay, so how do we do that? Give us some tips.
Okay, first, master your craft.
So become an expert at what you do.
Yes, whatever your field is.
Okay.
Business, art, science.
Become a master.
Knowledge builds confidence.
Okay.
And confidence inspires trust.
Got it.
You also got to project an air of calm and self-assurance.
Okay.
Even when you're feeling anxious or unsure.
So like fake it till you make it.
Kind of, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's about embodying the qualities you want to have. The more you practice, the more those qualities become a part of you.
So it's about aligning your inner self with your outer projection.
Exactly. And another key thing is decisiveness.
Okay.
Don't hesitate. Don't second-guess yourself.
People want a leader who seems sure of themselves.
Right, even if their decisions aren't perfect.
But what if you don't know the answer?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
But Greene says it's usually better to be decisive.
Okay.
People want guidance.
Right.
They're more likely to trust someone who has a plan.
Interesting.
He uses John D. Rockefeller as an example.
Okay, I've heard he was a shrewd businessman.
He was. He knew how to use rumors and silence.
How did he use those things?
Well, sometimes he'd spread rumors that he was buying up oil refineries.
Oh, wow. So he was playing mind games with his competition.
Totally. It would drive down prices.
And then he could buy them for cheap.
Exactly. He also knew how to use silence strategically.
Okay.
Sometimes saying nothing is more powerful.
Right. It creates that mystery.
Right. People weren't sure what he was going to do next.
So authority is about perception and managing information.
Yeah. It's not just what you say.
Right.
But also what you don't say.
And this all ties back to group dynamics, right?
Absolutely.
Understanding how people behave in groups.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Greene talks about how groups can bring out our primal instincts.
Right, like tribalism.
Right, that need to conform.
We're social creatures. We want to belong.
But that can make us do things we wouldn't normally do.
Totally, like go along with the crowd.
Even if we know it's wrong.
Exactly.
Greene talks about the group enemy.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It's like that us versus them mentality.
It's been driving human behavior forever.
Right, like rival sports teams or political parties.
It creates a sense of unity.
It's like we need an enemy.
Kind of, yeah, it's a primal thing.
But Greene says we can rise above that by being self-aware.
And having empathy.
Recognizing that people who are different aren't necessarily our enemies.
Right, we're all in this together.
Yeah, that's a good message. Especially these days when everyone feels so divided.
Totally.
Okay, so back to group dynamics. Greene also talks about these people who are really good at navigating those complex social situations.
Yeah, those court archetypes.
Right, like in those royal dramas.
But it's not just royalty.
Okay.
These archetypes are everywhere.
Like in offices?
Yeah.
Or even our friend groups.
Exactly.
So let's break down a few.
Okay.
We have the jester.
Right, the one who uses humor to challenge the group.
Yeah, they can say things other people can't.
They point out the absurdities without directly attacking anyone.
It's like they have this special immunity.
They do.
Then you have the mirrorer.
Right, reflecting people's opinions back to them.
Yeah, building trust and favor.
They make people feel seen and understood.
But isn't that kind of manipulative?
It can be,
okay,
but it depends on the intention.
Okay.
If it's genuine, it's about empathy.
Right, actually trying to connect.
But if it's manipulative,
yeah,
it's about using people.
Getting what you want.
Exactly.
So even good social skills can be used in bad ways.
Absolutely. It comes down to your intentions.
That's why self-awareness is so important.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, one more thing from Greene that really blew my mind.
Yeah.
This idea of historical cycles.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff.
History doesn't move in a straight line.
Right. It's more like a pendulum.
Swinging back and forth.
Between stability and chaos.
So we're not just making history.
Right.
We're also shaped by it.
Our values, our beliefs, even our behaviors.
They're all influenced by the trends of our time.
Exactly. It's like a dance.
Yeah, we're all part of it.
And Greene says understanding these cycles can help us understand our own time better.
Like we can see the potential problems.
And the opportunities.
And be ready for the changes that are coming.
Exactly. It's not about predicting the future, but about recognizing patterns.
Right, so we can adapt.
Exactly.
Okay, this has been so much to take in.
Yeah, lots to think about.
But I'm already feeling like I have a new understanding of human nature.
That's great.
Okay, let's take a quick breather.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and wrap things up. Okay, so where were we? Oh, yeah, embracing mortality.
Right. It's not exactly a light topic.
No, but you were saying it's actually liberating.
It can be, yeah. When you accept that life is finite, it changes how you look at things.
You stop worrying about the small stuff.
Right. You focus on what's important.
You live in the moment.
Exactly. And you appreciate each day more.
I remember that quote.
Which one?
Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
That's why it's called the present.
It really sums it up, doesn't it?
Embracing mortality isn't about being afraid of dying.
It's about acknowledging that it's a part of life.
Right, and that lets us live more authentically.
Exactly.
And that makes me think back to those court archetypes we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Can understanding those help us be more authentic?
Definitely. When you recognize those patterns in yourself and others,
Yeah.
it can show you your strengths and weaknesses. It helps you see how you navigate social situations.
It's not about forcing yourself into a specific role.
Right. It's about understanding the roles you're drawn to naturally.
Okay, so let's go back to the jester for a minute.
Okay.
Do you think we all have a little bit of the jester in us?
I think so, yeah.
It's like that part of us that questions things.
Yeah, that sees the funny side of things.
That doesn't take everything so seriously.
Exactly. And sometimes it's important to have that voice.
Especially in groups where everyone's being super serious.
Because the jester lightens the mood.
Right. Bring some balance. What about the mirror?
Oh, yeah. They're interesting.
It seems like a powerful technique.
It is.
But it can also be used to manipulate people.
Absolutely.
So how do we tell the difference?
It comes down to intention.
Oh.
Genuine mirroring comes from a good place.
Okay.
You're trying to understand the other person.
You're listening to them.
You're observing their body language.
Right.
You're trying to see things from their perspective.
So it's about building empathy.
Yes, not just saying what people want to hear.
But manipulative mirroring is about getting something for yourself.
Power, approval, whatever.
It's not about genuine connection.
Right.
Wow, so even good skills can be used for bad purposes.
It's true. And that's where self-awareness comes in.
Yeah, the knowing yourself.
So you can use those skills in a positive way.
Okay, one last thing that really stood out to me in Greene's book was this idea of historical cycles.
Oh, yeah, that was fascinating.
History repeats itself.
In a way, yeah, it's like a pendulum swinging back and forth.
Between order and chaos.
We're not just creating history, we're also being shaped by it.
That's a powerful thought.
Our values, our beliefs, they're all influenced by the trends of our time.
It's like we're all dancing to this historical rhythm.
And Greene says if we understand these cycles, we can understand our own time better.
So we can see what's coming.
Not predict the future exactly, but see the possibilities, the challenges.
So we can be prepared. Wow, okay. Well, we've covered a lot today.
We have.
From irrationality to seduction.
Empathy, group dynamics.
Purpose, mortality.
It's a lot.
It's like a crash course in human nature.
But the main takeaway for me is that knowledge is power.
When we understand what makes people tick, we can make better choices.
We can build better relationships.
We can live better lives.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some things we should remember?
First, don't forget about emotions.
They're powerful.
They drive us.
Even when we don't realize it.
Right. Second, practice empathy.
It's the key to connection.
Then understand it.
And finally, find your purpose.
It gives you direction.
It helps you through tough times.
And remember, understanding human nature is a lifelong journey.
It's always evolving.
There's always something new to learn.
About ourselves and the world around us.
Exactly.
So keep exploring, deep divers.
Keep learning.
Keep asking questions.
And never stop being curious about what makes us human.
That's it for this deep dive into the laws of human nature.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.